So switching over then to our near-death experiences, very kind of different topic, but maybe there's some connection here we'll talk about. But can maybe let's start by giving some definitions. How would you classify someone as having a near-death experience?
Well, that's a hot topic because it's hard to even define death. There are different definitions of death. A definition of a near-death experience from the time that this has been really seriously studied, which is about 40 years now. Michael Sabom, one of the earliest guys getting into NDEs, he said, a near-death state is one from which you have a cessation or apparent cessation of vital signs, and it's likely that you're going to die if somebody doesn't intervene quickly. That's the scenario. Now, it is true, and now here's a skeptic's going to speak up and go, hey, well, there are cases of people who aren't even anywhere near death and they have an NDE. That's correct. But how many do you want to talk about? 1%? 1% of the whole? According to a recent medical book on NDEs, a recent medical book, they estimate, written by a bunch of medical doctors, and the editor's a medical doctor, came up from a university press. They estimated that up to 30 million people in North America and Europe alone have experienced or witnessed near-death or near-death phenomena. 30 million in the world. I say it this way to people. I'll say, I'm obviously exaggerating, but I say to people, if 30 million people claim to have been to Narnia, maybe we should start thinking about there being a Narnia.
So
it's not true that they're just like, 4 or 5, 10 of them out there.
yeah, so there's tons of these things that are out there that we could be discussing, and a lot of good ones. Now, what would then classify one as being more? What does the evidence look like to confirm these? And maybe we can start getting into some of the specifics that you think are more powerful than others. Sure. But it's. I don't know. I guess my question is, people often ask me, like, what do I think about, like, heaven is for real? The boy that went, and then also the story is written about. Is it just, here's what I saw? How are we confirming that these things are actually happening?
Well, because of the evidence, and I had a written debate a couple of years ago, and I divided the evidential cases. I know of more than 300 evidential cases in the literature. And I divided the evidential cases into 5 categories. And I talked about evidence inside the room, inside whatever room it happens, often a hospital or an operating room, but also inside a hospital, or evidence outside the room. What happened on the ambulance? What was your family doing 6 floors below you in the hospital, outside the room? Then NDEs in the blind. Sometimes they're congenitally blind from birth or just hours after birth. What do people see when the only thing they say they've ever seen is during the NDE and they haven't seen anything before or after? So that's pretty major. And then 2 Twilight Zone categories. There are a few cases of healthy people who have shared the NDEers NDE. They have shared, they just happened to be there when the phenomena occurred, this supernatural scenario, and they witnessed it. The healthy people witnessed it. And then the last category, a lot of people pass away. And in fact, one article had over 24 of these in one article. They will be with a family member. And let's say that family member, a father, a mother, or a sibling, they've been dead for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years. I know one case longer than that. And they're with that person. And the person tells them something that nobody in the hospital knew. I'm making the scenario up, but some of them are like this. Dad, how you doing? And this thing only lasts for 30 seconds. And Dad says, John, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're going to get a telegram in 2 days. Your favorite cousin in Afghanistan was just killed. You're going to get the telegram in 2 days. And it happens. Or they will say, hey, your uncle in Japan just died. And they'll hear about it later. Or they'll be told something that nobody in the vicinity knows. Nobody in the room, nobody anywhere. So there's a lot of examples like this. Like I said, over 2 dozen of them in one article. Bruce Grayson, he's retired now from University of Virginia School of Medicine. He's a psychiatrist, and I think he was the director of the brain sciences program. But Bruce Grayson published over 100 peer-review articles only in medical journals and psych journals, over 100. So when people say, well, how come the doctors don't know about this? I sometimes, it's hard not to try to respond to a cocky person being cocky yourself. Like, well, why don't you try reading? Sometimes you just get tired of the comebacks with people who haven't studied at all, and all they have to go is they want to kind of boss you around with their anger. It's just sickening after a while.
Yeah. So what would then be kind of the apologetic significance of this? Why would you use, or, when would you use NDEs as evidence for something?
I suppose two general categories. When someone says something like, look around you. Have you ever seen anything supernatural? Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen, and it's always the same example. Have you ever seen a limb grow out right in front of your eyes? There actually is a couple cases of that in print, but have you seen a limb grow out? Have you seen this happen? Have you seen that happen? And I'll go, time out. What about, and I will give them, and it depends on what they say they want. I'll say, you want evidence inside the room, evidence outside the room, evidence in the blind, evidence from a healthy person, evidence that nobody knows that your deceased father, you have reason to believe he just told you this, and sure enough, the telegram comes in 2 days. Which of these examples do you want? What category? Oh, I don't know. Give me some, you're down in the room, and by the way, we know that a lot of these people have measurably, that's all you can say, measurably, no heart or no brain activity when they give the results. So if you have no heart, no brain, measurable, and you report something that's a mile away in your home, let's say, and it's evidenced, my experience is you don't have to give more than about 2 or 3 of those. And here's what the skeptic does. You're kidding me. Just like that? Where can I find this? Oh, it's in this book. Where else? It's in that medical journal. But really? Dude, that's good stuff. And that's how the conversation starts. So I use it as a conversation starter for people who basically say, there's no Narnia, there's no Middle Earth, there's no other world. We don't know anything about this. I'll say, well, you haven't read near-death experiences. The other way I use it is if somebody's talking to me about the resurrection, and they'll say, there's one problem with your evidence. One problem. We don't know of a world like that. Yeah. We don't know of a son of God who died and rose from the dead. You say yourself, it's never happened before. What are the odds that you're wrong? And of course, that's a paraphrase of David Hume. How do you know that you're wrong? I'll go time out. Do you want to talk about near-death experiences? Now, I've done this before in dialogues and had the skeptic go, no, I don't want to discuss near-death experiences. But here's my point. If NDEs tell us there's consciousness after the death of the body, if there's consciousness, if there's an afterlife, then how can you deny me talking about the afterlife, i.e. the resurrection of Jesus? Just before I went on the air with you, I am working on a large magnum opus on the resurrection. And I am in a chapter right now where I'm entertaining people who say that the resurrection of Jesus is like other near-death type phenomena because they're all similar phenomena from another world. And I think, well, I don't believe that. I think the resurrection of Jesus is unique. But the fact that they feel free to say, oh, that happens all the time. Really? Yeah. If it happens all the time, then why don't you believe in the supernatural? So that's the other way I use it, to kind of open up the door to either as an attention getter, have you heard about this evidence, or as a door to eternity, because there's no coincidence. See, I could do intelligent design, but people would say, well, yeah, the odds that would happen are pretty strange. Now, how do you get the resurrection? But if you have an NDE, they see the relevance because it's about afterlife, and so is the resurrection.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned your magnum opus. How many pages are you at right now?
I'm at about, I do one chapter at a time, so I don't have a running total. But the last time I counted a couple months ago, I think I was a little over 4,700 pages.
Oh, my goodness. And I think I heard an interview where you said a lot of that is still new information, not included in your other, you've written about 15 books or so on the resurrection?
I've written 20-something
20-something.
On I've done 40-something books, and almost exactly half of them are on the resurrection. Wow. Now, in this magnum opus, I don't think the duplicate stuff even hits 10%. I think it's 90% new material.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Well, okay, so you're mentioning, okay, let's use some of these NDEs as good evidence to show that there's a supernatural world, that there is this immaterial world. We have souls that points to obviously huge Christian implications. What examples should people use? I think probably the most common one is the heaven is for real boy going up to heaven and seeing his sister or whoever it was. Is that a good example to use, or are there stronger, more evidentially based ones that you would prefer using?
There are ones that would just, to use a colloquial phrase, I'm from Detroit, drag racing capital. It would blow somebody's doors off. It just these. I mean, I use different ones, but just an example of something that really gets people attention and lets me get in and out of it real quickly. But there's a case where a woman was in this state where her mind, and she all of a sudden has an NDE in a hospital, and she goes up above her body, and she looks down on a medical device in the room that is over everybody's head. It's about 6 or 8 feet tall, but she's up above, so she sees a riveted number on the top of the machine, and there's 12 digits. When she comes to, she says to the nurse in the room, she says, get a pen, get a piece of paper. I can tell you something right away. She says, I'm obsessive compulsive. I'm OCD. And I saw a number while I was up there. I want to tell you what it is. It's a 12-digit number. And she repeats this random 12-digit number. And a few days later, they were going to move this machine, and they wouldn't let the guys move the machine until somebody went up there on a ladder and checked the number. And she got all 12 digits right, although she was up above her body, and they're frantically trying to resuscitate her to bring her back to life. But she repeated the 12-digit number. What are the odds that, she'd get 12 digits right in order?
Yeah.
So,
and then,
I know somebody, go ahead.
Oh, and that's what I was going to say. And then you've told me that one of your students or a research person that works for you or something knows that nurse and went and talked and found that nurse.
That's correct.
That wrote down the number.
That's correct. We have it in writing. Yeah. And another person, they found a quarter that somebody tossed up into the rafters. We're always trying to throw money up in the rafters. And it was a 1982 quarter. And they said that, well, come on, that quarter is going to be sometime between 1975 and 2020. Great, but that's 45 years.
Yeah.
And so it's either going to be 19 or 20, and it's going to be one of the numbers between 75 and 20. 1975 to 2020. And what are the odds you're going to get the quarter right?
Yeah.
And there's just many, many cases inside the room, outside the room. So it usually takes me a little longer to tell the story, so I don't want to take your time up. But some of these short ones, there's a famous case of a gal who was, as far as the doctors could tell, she was measurably brain dead. And she told what her mom was making for dinner in her home outside the hospital. She looked in on her home and saw what her mom was making for dinner after her parents had to go home for the night. She was on a machine to breathe because she had no gag reflex and no activity when probed. They said in fact, the medical doctor on duty told me that she had about a 1 in 10,000 chance of living, and about 10% of that living with any kind of mental content or memory. And she correctly told what her mom was making for dinner.
Now, is that something where the skeptic says, well, they always make that food on a Tuesday night, so, of course, she would know what her mom was making? Or is there something to that story where it is a crazy meal that normally is not cooked?
Yeah, no, I don't think it was a crazy meal. It was a variety of chicken, and she was making roast chicken or rice, if I remember the story. But if somebody, there's so many of these cases, there's over 300 of them. That's a good comeback. But if someone goes, well, how do you know it was on it? And you go, well, I don't know. I never asked her that question. Oh, do you have another one? Yeah, I'll give you another one. I'll give you another one. I'll give you another one. How many would you get up to? 10? Like the 12-digit number? How many? Here's another one, a real quick one. It's not as evidential, but it's really interesting. This lady was arguing with her doctor after surgery, and he said, ma'am, we've already checked that thing. We had the machine in the room. And she said, you didn't have it. And he said, we did have the machine in the room. And she goes, go down and check it, because it wasn't plugged in. I was up above my body. You guys didn't plug the machine in. He said, just a second. He went out of the room and ran down there. The machine wasn't plugged into the wall. just things like that.
Yeah.
And you can wear people out with the data because there's so many of these things.